everybody. My name is Kinza, and as Sophie mentioned, I'm a current MBA student. And prior to starting the MBA, I was at Accenture as a strategy consultant and recently launched my own chocolate company. And Peter is thank you for joining us today. Peter Harris is the co-founder of Hotel Chocolat. And today, Hotel Chocolat is one of the most recognizable brands in the UK. And recently, it sold over to Mars for over £500 million. Welcome, Peter. Wonderful. So I think a great place to get started, so we really know you, would be if you look back in your life and you connect the dots in your childhood, what would you say those dots were that led you to your entrepreneurial career and your success in your professional life?
Quite interesting, actually, because I went to a school in Kingston upon Thames called Kingston Grammar School. I was rubbish at it. I got 6 O-levels with very poor grades. I didn't sort of love the school, so when people said afterwards, is there one person that really inspired you? The answer is no. But having said that, they've asked me back many times to talk to the students, and I resisted it for a long time, but I've been back about 3 times now. They asked me to give out the prizes, which is extraordinary considering my academic background was so poor. But one of the things they said is there must be something that the school did for you. And the only thing I can actually remember was going on a skiing trip to Poland in 1965, December 1965, January 1966. And I was the youngest boy, I was 10, I was the youngest boy on this trip, the smallest boy on this trip. And they said, and this was when Poland was behind the Iron Curtain, so it was quite a big thing to take a load of school kids to another country, especially one behind the Iron Curtain. And they said, whatever you do, don't take any things you can sell. And I said, well, what sort of things do you mean? They said, like records. There's no one old enough in here to remember vinyl, but I know it's coming back. But vinyl records, jeans were the 2 things that were specifically mentioned. So I thought, great. So I went off and got my singles, took a pack of those, took about 2 or 3 pairs of jeans, and we got out to Poland. We sold these, and the Polish school children absolutely loved it because they weren't able to get hold of any of these things. And we got quite a lot of Polish zlotys, which is the currency. And the trouble is you can't take them out of the country. So we'd made all this money, but couldn't do anything with it. So all we could find to buy was some Moncherie chocolates, which is sort of ironic that at 10 I was buying these chocolates, and we had loads of them, which we took back. But that was about the first entrepreneurial thing I did. Mm-hmm. But as it then went on, I liked working because I wanted to earn money. So I did a variety of things. I did a paper round. I cleaned cars, Lotus cars, because I liked Lotuses, and there was a Lotus garage up the road. And I worked in a clothes shop in Kingston on Thames, and I was an ice cream man. As soon as I was 17, there was a place that had a load of ice cream vans, and if you had a driving license, they were fine, even if you're only 17. They'd just say, there you are, go to the Oval, and here's your pass, sell loads of ice cream. So I sort of had a desire to work, but the next thing you're probably going to ask me is there anything that links through? I don't know, is that what you want me to take this? I don't want to...
No, of course. I think you were definitely the person in school then who had a tuck shop. There's always that kid who has opens their blazer and has the Twix bar and the Mars bar, at break time. Were you one of those kids?
I wasn't really.
Okay.
I mean, it's funny because I did a talk to my old school last week, and one of the things they asked me to come up with a few words that they thought might be helpful to their students. And what I came up with was, in life, you're given a set of cards, make the very best of them, but above all, respect yourself. And then I followed this with a little bit of an explanation saying, look, when I was at school, I was the smallest boy in the school. I was probably the ugliest boy at school. I was, so the things, I was the slowest runner, so none of the things that you want to be, I wasn't any of those things. But I was still perfectly happy. I think I had a pretty reasonable sense of humour. And so I just say you have to look for the good in yourself. And I think this is more of a current day thing, that people try and compare themselves to other people, they're envious. And those are things that you shouldn't have. You should be happy with what you've got and make the very best of it. So I think from a comment about life, that is probably one of the most powerful. And respecting yourself. In other words, you've got everyone's got good in them, and you should be proud of that.
So after school, you trained as a chartered accountant. Now that seems like, excuse me, quite the cautious profession, for somebody who took such bold risks.
It's funny because when I was 15, we'll come on to the later stuff in a minute, I'm sure, but when I was 15, my mother said to me, "Peter, what are you going to do for a career?" And I said, "I don't know, maybe I could go into business," because my dad was a businessman. And so she said, okay. So she took us round to a friend's house in Walton-on-Thames, and he was quite a very successful businessman. He was the chief exec of a company called Rank Hovis McDougall, but he was the guy that invented Kipling cakes. So his house was called Kipling, and it was a beautiful house, and we sat by his swimming pool on a table just by the pool in this beautiful garden, this beautiful house. And my mother said to him, "Gerald, tell Peter how you got into business." And he said, "Well, I trained to be a chartered accountant, and one thing led to another." That's all he said. And that was enough for me. And it just completely inspired me. And even though I was bad at academically, I decided I wanted to be a chartered accountant, but not because I liked being a chartered accountant, but as a stepping stone, as a qualification to take me on to the next stage. And it was a brilliant move because I've never, ever regretted that.
Amazing. I mean, would you say you moved into that profession because it felt like a safe choice almost? No.
It was more that it was a way that I could get into business.
Okay. So in the back of your mind, you were aware that this is a stepping stone and I eventually would like to go down business, but knowing about the finances is very important.
Yeah, it was interesting because training to be an accountant, I was an auditor for, 6 or 7 years, and you don't really know what you're letting yourself in for when you're 15, but I realised very quickly that you're put into lots of different companies to do their audits, and so I was literally let loose with all sorts of business, from tannoy speakers to Ford main dealers to publishing companies to building companies, and you're dealing with the accounts, and they're not that difficult to understand in smaller sort of businesses. And I was dealing with the directors of those businesses, and so I was just a bushy-tailed 21-year-old. And I suppose I've always been quite confident, and I put that down to my mother, because she made me and my 2 brothers very independent, and that's basically by leaving us on our own to get on with it, but not in a nasty way. So, I can never remember anyone else ironing my shirts apart from me, even at probably 10 years old. And packing my own stuff for Cub Camp, it was my responsibility. So taking responsibility was sort of natural. But no, I'll lead on to it.
So that responsibility kind of took you into the tech scene, which you were very early on in Cambridge. How did that come about?
When I qualified, I met a guy qualifying at the same time as me, and we set up a firm that specialised in tax consultancy. And this was at a time that hopefully we're not heading back to, when the highest rate of income tax, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, was 98%.
Oh my God.
Can anyone believe that? Does anyone believe that's true? Do you know that? That's in 1978. So it was 98% on investment income. And so we came up with a way that you could avoid that stupidly high tax. And that worked for about 2 years until Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister. And she was obviously much more sensible. And I'm not saying that politically, I'm just saying from a common sense point of view. She cut the taxes straight away. So it sort of, I wouldn't say destroyed our business, but made our business less workable. And so that led us into helping companies in Cambridge raising, because we'd moved to Cambridge because our office was in London and it was an expensive office, so we then moved to a cheaper office in Bridge Street in Cambridge, in fact. And while we were there, we met all sorts of Cambridge people because this was very early days in the Cambridge phenomenon. So, Clive Sinclair, Chris Curry, Herman Hauser, I used to play squash with him. It was just really early days. And so we helped a lot of businesses in different ways, and one of them was to help them raise money. But that was a bit boring, so we actually decided to raise money for ourselves. This was my business partner at the time. And we raised, for Torch Computers, £250,000 completely unsecured. And to this day, I don't know anyone who's raised that amount of money completely unsecured.
When you say unsecured, what do you mean exactly here?
If it went bust, I'd just say, well, cheerio. There was no personal guarantees. They asked us for personal guarantees, but I said to them, look, I haven't got any money. All you'll do is bankrupt me and destroy a career before it's even started. And coming back to chartered accountancy, I know why they did that, because we had a meeting and the bank manager accidentally left his file in one of our rooms when we were showing him round, and he forgot to pick it up before he went. So of course, it was only the right thing for me to just check every page was okay. So I looked through this file, and there was one page in it that said, these guys aren't typical technical people, entrepreneurs. They've got financial background. It's worth giving it a go. And I think the bank thought that. And they were right, because we actually paid that £250,000 back. So it wasn't a bad debt. So, it's extraordinary. But if I hadn't have been a chartered accountant, I don't think I'd have raised that money.
Yeah, I guess so. You were relatively familiar with raising, right, in the context of entrepreneurship almost, but with a safety net, right? Because this was for Torch Computers at the time.
That's right. But having said that, I was, I can't remember how old I was. I think I was 26.
Okay. And
we were a very gung-ho business. So literally, this was before formalised private equity. This was venture capital. People gave us money. We recruited the best people we could. And it was a phenomenal time. And in a way, it was almost like a three-dimensional university in entrepreneurship, because out of Torch Computers, there are so many very, very successful people have come out of it. And the reason for that is that we gave people responsibility very young and very early, because we didn't have teams of people to do stuff. So we recruited people, say, oh, by the way, can you just do this? Can you, build these computers? And so people learnt really very, very quickly. And so there's people, like one of the people that came out of Torch was a chap called Charles Dunstan, who set up Carphone Warehouse. I gave him, I'm his first boss. I gave him a job in the support team. But there's just loads of other people as well who've been very successful. And I'm proud of that, because it was like the school for learning. It was just basically the deep end.
Yeah, so it almost seems like you had a whistle-stop tour of entrepreneurship whilst at Torch Computers. Would you say that's why you kind of felt safe to start your next venture, which was, well, I guess your first venture in that sense, which was Mint Marketing?
It's funny, the thing that Torch Computers taught me more than anything else is that it's uncomfortable if you don't make money. If you're profitable, and that's not just in figures, but in cash, then it gives you time. And in Torch, we were profitable some of the time, but we were not profitable a lot of the time. And the effect of that is you keep running out of money, you keep having to go back cap in hand. So my original 40% I owned of that business turned into a bus ticket. So when we sold Torch Computers, we sold it for £1 million, and that £1 million went into the company, and the new people had the shares. So I was happy because I didn't want the company to go bust, just from I just felt it was wrong for that to happen. So it was lovely that it continued, for a few years after I left. So I didn't sort of hand it over, and it was bankrupt.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful to hear that, even early on you held with your morals, because nowadays we often see that, in the world of entrepreneurship, it's kind of very chaotic, and it's like dog eat dog almost, right? So it's really wonderful to see that you led with your morals. Would you say that it's what gave you the courage to kind of move into the world of confectionery? And was it from a position of strength that you moved into that world?
Well, not really, because, when you've been through the mill, it was six, I was at Torch 6 years. I was the only director that lasted from the beginning to the end of our ownership. And at the end of that, when the business was gone, I had a decent job, I had a company car, expenses and all that. And suddenly, when that's gone, you've got none of that. So we had to start again. So it wasn't from a position of confidence. And what I'd done is, at Torch, I'd recruited Angus, who about a year before. And so I worked with him for a year. And this is really quite interesting, because he wasn't a friend of mine. He was someone who I worked with. And it was interesting because we really liked working together. We had complementary skills, and we liked it. And so when the business ended, we said, look, we'd like to start a business. And we were then sort of thrashing around trying to dream up an idea of a business. And we thought, we liked things like good bread, we liked good food, good olive oil, things like that. And so we thought maybe we could do, find a business there. We also thought of shellfish. And we thought about, one of the ideas we had was shellfish by post. But obviously that's, there's a few problems there, because you've got to keep them nice and chilled and fresh and all that. So, but I'm just saying, we were brainstorming to try and think of ideas. And then we hit upon the idea of mint marketing, which was little packs of peppermints with companies' names on them. And the idea was really, we'd been round to a lot of exhibitions around Europe and Scandinavia, and people were giving away lots of pens and things called logo bugs, so little ladybirds and little things with ribbons with their name printed on. So we liked the idea of mints that we could brand, because it gave you something that was sort of consumable, edible, quite interesting. And so we just decided, right, that's what we're going to do. And we raised we borrowed from the bank £5,000 each to put into the company, and the bank topped that up with another £15,000. So that was £25,000 of money we'd got. And funny enough, to raise that £15,000 was as difficult as the £250,000 unsecured, because things had got a bit tighter by then. And anyway, so we literally had an amazing approach, because this was a little product, but we were so evangelical about it. So the first 10 customers that we had, or first 10 prospects we had, I think something like 6 of them turned into orders. That is unbelievable. If someone says you've got 100 prospects, you'd be happy if you got 2 or 3. We got 60%. But the reason is that we were very targeted in what we did. So we used to sit in, I mean, it's a sad story this, but we used to sit in Cambridge Library with a pair of scissors and some glue and the colour supplements and these little packs of peppermints, and we'd cut out adverts for, say, BP or Ford or Panasonic and literally wrap them around these mints, because we didn't have an office, you see, so the Cambridge Library in Lion Yard was where we went. And we then we rang up companies, found out who the marketing manager was, sent these mints with a covering letter, and we'd also got some good publicity in the broadsheets, so in the Times, the Telegraph, the Independent, and we did a photocopy of one of those articles which said, you know, it's quite exciting because it said 2 guys have canned their great jobs in the computer industry to start this business selling mints, and it was brilliant for us because it made people quite excited about it. But we literally were very keen. So to give you an example, I remember sending a pack of mints to BP. I rang them up the next day and I said, hello, it's Peter Harris here from the Mint Marketing Company. Did you get the pack of mints that I sent you? And the chap said, yeah, I did. And I said, what did you think of them? And he said, yeah, they were great. And I said, will you be ordering them? And he says, well, I need to obviously talk to my colleagues. Or no, talk to one of my colleagues first. And so I said, okay, great, put the phone down. Then in the afternoon, I rang him up and said, have you spoken to your colleague yet? And that was sort of very typical of how we felt and how impatient we were about getting our ideas going.
Yeah. So I think what's really key here is very early on, because you got that traction, to continue that, you also put in some marketing material from the newspaper, was it, that you were mentioning?
Yes.
Just so you had validity and your
Yes.
future clients could see that. So you're into mint marketing for a few years, and then I believe it is a customer of yours that requests, or rather a client that requests, if you sell chocolates. Would you talk about how that story came about and how you pivoted to chocolate?
I've done quite a few talks to MBA students, Cambridge University, for the past, 15 years or so. And I sometimes call my talk listening to customers, because I think there's in Cambridge, and I'm not trying to be sort of self-critical of us in Cambridge, but I think there is a slight shortage of people who've got the link to the customer. So with our business, listening to customers was crucial. So we had this one little pack of mints, which was our only product. And I can remember a meeting we had with one of the London hotels in Park Lane, and this chap said, we love your mints, but what else do you do? And we sort of looked at him and said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, do you do a little box of chocolates with our name on? So we said, leave it with us, we'll come back to you. So we went away, made up this little box of chocolates, went out to a shop in the high street, bought some chocolates, put them in. This little mock-up had his name of his hotel on there, and we took them in to this guy and said, showed him the box, said, is this the sort of thing you mean? And he said, that's exactly what I mean. I'd like to order 5,000. And we sort of said, oh, great, yes. Shuffling in our chairs. But, this was amazing because, most people have a tricky development cycle. Whereas with us, we basically made this little mock-up, gone in there, and the chap said, yes, I'll have some. So we had to then somehow work out how we could make those boxes, buy the chocolates, pack the chocolates, and keep inside the food safety laws and all those sorts of things. But of course, if you're dedicated to your business, it's funny, I don't love the word entrepreneur, although I know I am one. I never sort of use it. I always call myself a businessman, but what I'm really saying is that business people always find ways to resolve problems. They're sometimes very difficult problems. And so this was, okay, can we find a printer that's going to be able to do these? And, of course, we rattled around talking to people. Yeah. And, in a short period of time, you find a way to do it. and we got going. And then when you've done one of these boxes, you know how to print the second one because you've in this case created the dies that cut out the shape, found a printer who could print this first of all, and it was brilliant. We had so when you've got the first one was the Inn on the Park. That's the name of the hotel. It's no longer there. It's changed its name to something else. But then we took it to other people, and they see that name, and so you then get Ford Motor Company or Aston Martin or Barclays Bank or whatever. And the more reference customers you get, the more credible you seem. So we used to then print little catalogues, which literally was a display of all our, not all, a lot of our well-known customers. And people opened it up and thought, wow, if that company's prepared to do it, then I am. And I only got criticised once, actually. It's because we did mints for McLaren, the Formula One team. And of course, I liked the name, and it was they were winning the World Championship the whole time at this time. And so we then put it in the catalogue, and I got a letter from some sort of, chief, some sort of legal director or something, saying, you can't use it. I think, I'm so sorry. So
Did they sue back then?
They didn't. No, they didn't. They said, just don't put it in the next one. So they didn't put us to the sword, but,
Yeah. So from Mint Marketing, you then started making chocolates. Is this when you then rebranded Mint Marketing to ChocExpress?
Well, we didn't actually make chocolates at that time. Okay. So this takes us from, we started the business in 87. In 1993, a number of people used to say to us, oh, you must be very busy around Christmas. And as we were selling into the corporate market, the business market, people don't typically buy chocolates that get confused with seasons. So we weren't very busy around Christmas, but we wanted to be because we knew it's obviously a very big seasonal event, Christmas and Easter. And so we came up with the idea of a box of chocolates that we could send through the post, which we gave the name Chocogram. That box, the reason it's that shape is the profile of it goes through a letterbox. You can see the size of it is like this. And that is the single reason why it's stayed that shape since 1993. And so we called it the Chocogram. And then over a period of 10 years, from 93 to 2003, we built that up. That was our main business, as well as the corporate chocolates and mint side. And we became 4 times bigger than our nearest competitor on delivered chocolates. That was because we'd started to dominate that particular evolving market. And that company was called Thornton's. And so we were 4 times bigger than them, which was, we loved, of course.
I think they're struggling a bit right now, aren't they?
Well, when we opened our first Hotel Chocolat shop, we'll come back in a second, they had 600 shops.
Right.
They've got 0 now.
Yeah.
But no, so with ChocExpress, the thing about that brand, and I've got this thing that you should be able to describe what your company does in less than 30 seconds. And that's probably a bit of a challenge for some people where they've got a more technical thing, but I'll throw it out there anyway. And so with Mint Marketing Company, hello, this is Peter Harris from Mint Marketing Company. And someone said, well, what do you do? Oh, we market mints. And it sort of said it in the title. And in a way, ChocExpress did the same thing. It was chocolates that get to you quickly or are sent quickly. And that's the good news, because that's what we wanted to emphasize. The bad news was it didn't focus on quality. And so and yet the chocolates, at that time, we weren't making any of our own chocolates. We actually had them made by many specialist, typically family businesses across Europe. So we used to buy chocolates from the UK, from France, from Belgium, from Holland, from Italy, from Spain, literally Switzerland. So literally we were happy to buy chocolates from good people. And so our chocolates were very good, and we actually got them to make chocolates to our recipes. So we would suggest how we wanted our chocolates, and we'd place a big enough order. But there was no focus on the quality of the product. So the maximum compliment we could get in 2003 was, actually, your chocolates are quite good. And we felt, if that's the best that you can, best compliment you can get about your products, which you know are fantastic, and you'll be able to taste them later anyway. But that was so that really sort of was quite upsetting, but it was a sort of wake-up call. So it forced us to say, what are we going to do about this? And that's why we felt we had to rebrand to a name and a brand that would focus on good quality. And that's why we went from ChocExpress to Hotel Chocolat.
Makes sense. I've seen that you rebranded almost just 1 year before opening your, I guess, pilot store in Watford. Was that a challenge in any way? Because obviously your previous customers knew you as ChocExpress, and you've only had 1 year of exposure as Hotel Chocolat. So how did you go about ensuring that there was continuity with the brand?
It's a good question. With retail, we didn't, I mean, as I said earlier on, Thornton's had 600 stores, and we didn't really see ourselves as being retailers at that point. But when we rebranded, the people that did some of the artwork also did a shop to sort of show what it would look like, because we'd said, what would it look like on a shop? In other words, it looks great on a catalogue or online, but what would it look like? And they did this, and it made us a little bit sort of interested. Maybe we should try a shop. We could just try one shop. If it works, great. If it doesn't, at least we've tried it. And so we did a year, well, we rebranded in 2003, and we actually opened our first shop in 2004 in Watford, in the Harlequin Centre. And it's still there, and it's still open. And it's quite interesting because we chose that. A lot of people said, well, why didn't you open one in Cambridge? Because you know Cambridge. And we said, if we did that, people would say, oh, those nice chaps, the local chaps of the chocolate business, maybe we should go and support them. And we didn't want that. We wanted to try what we describe as a vanilla place, where if we were successful in Watford, I mean, we didn't know a soul in Watford, so if we were successful there, then we had a chance of it being a formula that we could then spread to other locations. But it's interesting, though, we did the first store, about £400,000 of sales, but then we decided to open a second store, and we chose Milton Keynes. And what we decided to do on this one is to mail our database, because we'd built up a database of 250,000 people. So no one knew about ChocExpress, but unless you were on our database. And so we had these people. So when we changed to Hotel Chocolat, nobody knew about us. So apart from our customers, so we wanted to widen that. So we opened this store in Milton Keynes, sent it to our database, said, come and see us in real life, come and see our chocolates. And if you think about it, Milton Keynes is at a very convenient crossroads, M1, A14 or whatever. And literally people came into that shop like there was no tomorrow. And it's a busy shopping mall. And that store went straight to £1 million turnover a year straight away. So it fired us up, something rotten. And we just thought to ourselves, what have we got here? And so we then decided to open another 10 stores, and we did this. And so our sales went from, in year one on the shops, £400,000 to year three, 16 million. So we were the number one fastest growing company in the UK, number one on the Virgin Atlantic, Sunday Times, Fast Track 100. But, that's one thing, because that's all about sales. But the thing I was most proud of is that we didn't borrow money to do it, because, as you know, I'm a chartered accountant. and I was responsible for the finances of the business. I'd worked out that if we opened the stores in the period up to Christmas, that would then pay for the shop fit, and we didn't actually need to borrow any money. And it was amazing because it sounds incredibly simple, but you have to do it and prove that it works. But they still do it to this day.
Yeah. A lot of us MBAs here are studying, we have a module called corporate finance, so we're understanding the importance of, 5% of being a chartered accountant. So I see that for sure. Was it within those 3 years that you also started to manufacture your own chocolates?
Well, it was towards the end of that 3 years, because when you're in a business, as some of you will already know, is you have problems in your business. It's not always the same problem, and you solve one problem and then another one pops up over here. So you might get your sales going, but then production suffering, or you get your money sorted out and then you have some other problem. So you need new premises or something. So with us, we got the sales line pretty well sorted out, but then we went back to our suppliers, these great little family businesses, and said, please, could we increase our order for next year? And they said, yeah, that would be fine. And we said, well, we'd like to increase it by 50%. And they said, whoa, no, we could do 10%. And when you're in business and you're opening these shops and you realize you can create this demand, it's actually quite frightening when somebody says, we can't do any more. They say, look, we've only got a small business, set size property, that's the best we can do. And so although we bought from many different places, it still put pressure on us. So we decided, let's start to manufacture. And, we knew items that we were selling very successfully. If we could make those, that would take a little bit of the heat off. And in 2004, I'd actually bought a freehold factory in Huntingdon for £2.4 million on a 6-acre site. It was an old plastics, injection moulding plastics place that looked terrible when we bought it. And I made it into a food factory by clearing out all the pipe work, putting superb floors in, getting rid of glass, and literally bringing it up to the spec of a good food factory. But this was much bigger than we needed at that time. But it gave us the opportunity that when we wanted to manufacture, we had a place to put the manufacturing equipment, and that's quite bulky, so it's big, long lines. So in 2008, we bought our first, and it sounds like we started with, it sounds like we didn't know anything about manufacturing at all, but that's not quite true, because we were packing chocolates. So all these chocolates were coming in from, 30 different suppliers, and we were then packing them in boxes. So we had a factory environment. It was just that we didn't have liquid chocolate at that point. But a few of our people were experienced factory people. So when we decided to buy our first production line, we had people to operate it. And that first one cost £750,000, and it paid for itself within 9 months. And it was staggering, because if you think about it, we had our customers were buying from our shops and online. So we knew we could place an order for 1 million of this type of chocolate, and we knew we had a firm order because we knew the customers. They were our customers. So it was great, and that fired us up. And so that was 2008. And if you bring us right up to date now, all the chocolates are made in Huntingdon in the same factory. It's expanded, it's built on more buildings, but over 250 million chocolates a year, plus all the velvetizer flakes. Can I just ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
How many of you in this room have actually been into a Hotel Chocolat shop? Okay, that's quite interesting. That's probably 50%. Right, the other 50%, can you do me a favour, please? Could you go into the Hotel Chocolat shop in Lion Yard? It's quite close to here. and you'll see lots of different things. But one of them is something called the Velvetizer, which is an amazing hot chocolate making machine. You just put cold milk in. You all right with this thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
You put cold milk in and a sachet of flakes, and the flakes are literally just grated chocolate. They're nothing. There's no additives, no change of formula. And you press the button, and 2.5 minutes later, you get perfect hot chocolate. And it's no surprise that Hotel Chocolat has sold well over 1 million of those in the UK alone.
No, it's delicious. I've had the orange flavour, the milk chocolate.
There we are. We didn't set this up.
No, we didn't. Especially this time of the year, it's really nice actually. So if I just kind of give your entire journey here, we've got you who started as a chartered accountant, then came Mint Marketing, ChocExpress, Hotel Chocolat, then you launched your first store in 2003?
2004 was the first store.
2004, right. And then you started manufacturing as well.
In 2008.
In 2008. And I think what's really interesting here, when I look at also other entrepreneur story, what's really unique here is the value of the customer and how you've always listened to the customer. So firstly, obviously, when you started Mint Marketing and, you had a customer ask for chocolates, you pivoted in the right direction. And then secondly is that a customer sent you a book on cocoa production, and that led you to St. Lucia and Putch Singer Estate, which is now a cocoa farm. And then thirdly, which I'd really love if you could talk about, is your chocolate tasting club and how you use loyal customers to essentially raise a lot of money in a way that didn't dilute any equity at all. Would you mind talking about that and how that idea came about?
Do you want me to say a little bit about the cocoa estate as well?
Sure, yeah. I think we're almost close to time, but please.
Are we? Okay. No, I was just going to say on the cocoa estate, at that time, Angus, my business partner, and I owned the business 50-50. We hadn't sold any of the shares. And that was one of the things that I thought was really key. Don't give away the equity lightly because it complicates your structure. So we went over to St. Lucia, and literally within a week, we bought a cocoa estate because we had the money, we had the people that controlled the business, and we just did it. And most people would say, wow, that's completely mad. Why the hell did you do that? But, we just decided it's something we wanted to do. We wanted to be closer to cocoa. It was the oldest cocoa estate in St. Lucia, making what they call fine flavour cocoa, or growing fine flavour cocoa. And it's an amazing place. It's now, we developed it with, we regenerated the cocoa. We built a hotel, 25-room boutique hotel. It's amazing. It's in a World Heritage Site. There's also a visitor attraction that shows you how cocoa grows literally in the fields. Well, they're not really fields. It's sort of forest, rainforest, and that so it shows you how it grows through to how you actually make chocolate. So if you get the chance to go to St. Lucia, have a look, and if you don't, look it up, Project Chocolat St. Lucia on Instagram, and you'll see what it does. Sorry, you were actually saying about the chocolate bonds. It's funny because in 2008, 2009, it was a very difficult time financially. The banks were all over the place. They were frightened to lend to people, and there'd been various financial crashes, none of which bothered us as business people. I'm being slightly flippant with my words, but we just kept our heads down, selling our chocolates, making our chocolates, and doing the best job we could. And that's what people should do. You shouldn't worry too much about outside noise. Anyway, we knew we'd got about 100,000 members of something called our Chocolate Tasting Club, which we'd set up around that time, and we were putting a different box of chocolates together each month, and said that people were having a box of these every month or every other month. And people loved what we did, and that was because we were, our three cornerstones were originality, authenticity, and ethics. And these resonated with our customers. So they liked what we did. It was original. They liked the ethical way we approached our business life. So we came up with this idea of a chocolate bond. So we said to our customers, lend us £2,000 or £4,000, and we won't pay you any interest, but in return we'll send you either 6 boxes of chocolates if you lend us £2,000, or 13 boxes if you lend us £4,000. And I told our bank at the time, this is what we're doing, and they said, well, yeah, it's a nice idea, but you'll probably raise about £200,000 or something. We raised £4 million, and we were delighted, and all our sort of forecasts suggested we were going to get over £2 million, but 4 million sort of really was a spectacular result. And the reason for that, it wasn't because the chocolates meant the interest was better than you would have got if you'd have put it in a bank. It was because people loved our business. They felt they wanted to be part of our business. They felt they wanted to help our business, and they were emotionally attached to it, which is great. And you know, it's how we felt about our customers. They felt about us, and so they did it. And then we tried the same thing again, and we raised another £3 million, which was amazing. That's the good news. The bad news was I tried to get the tax authorities to pre-agree what the tax treatment would be of how we were going to handle giving these chocolates away. Anyway, they were terrible because they wouldn't give us an answer. They said, no, you can just do it and then we'll look at it afterwards. And when we'd done it, they then literally taxed us every which way, you know, VAT and, you know, the retail price rather than the cost price. So it was absolute disgrace for on the government's part at the time. And it actually led us to when we floated in 2016, paying back all our customers with the money they lent us because it was so much cheaper to borrow money rather than to keep their money, which is terribly sad because a load of our customers were upset about that, said, I want to have the chocolate still.
I think although the government may not have been by your side, you know, it was extremely innovative because it's very hard to raise, you know, those sort of sums without ever diluting equity. So we're going to, before we give the audience some questions to ask, we've got a quick fire round of what we've called chocolate confessions. So you don't have that much time, but okay. There's only 10 questions, so ready when you are.
Okay, yeah.
Dark milk or white?
Milk's the most successful. Hotel Chocolat has the first ingredient in all 3 of those is cocoa. Even white chocolate, the first ingredient is cocoa.
So milk.
So milk's my favourite.
Got it. What's the sweetest deal you've ever made?
Sweetest deal I've ever made. I couldn't remember the answer to that one. Can we come back to that one?
We can come back to that. What about the boldest idea you've ever said yes to?
I think it must be buying the cocoa estate in St. Lucia. And, you know, it's funny because I know it's a quick thing here, but I was the one that wanted to buy it and I was the cautious one in our business relationship. So we had a sort of role reversal. But I just knew it was in a World Heritage site. It was amazing. And I just knew that if it all went wrong, I could definitely sell it again. So that was my sort of parachute in the background.
Sounds good. An idea you're very glad you killed?
There was a time where we had a product in our shops which was a cocoa version of beef jerky. I absolutely hated that being in the stores. It wasn't my idea, but fortunately the customers voted it down and that was good.
Your biggest pet peeve, other than, you know, people calling it Hotel Chocolat and not chocolat?
Pet peeve. I don't know. I mean, it's in business. You have to be optimistic in business, and you know. So when people are too negative, you know, I think it's good to be realistic, but not to be too negative. So you've got to sort of. It's that whole thing about it's infectious to be an optimist, and it's also infectious to be a pessimist. So you can destroy the spirit in an office or in a team if you're too depressing and pessimistic. So I'd say That's what
Yeah,
peeves me.
it's almost an infectious enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Okay. And a quote or mantra you live by?
I think I said it at the beginning, which is, in life you're dealt a set of cards, make the very best of them.
Okay. And if you could send a chocolate bar to anyone in history, who gets it, and what would the inside wrapper say?
I mean, you've got to sort of, you've got to like Winston Churchill. I mean, it's, if any of you saw The Darkest Hour, you know, he was on his own, and I think a bar of chocolate, he'd have absolutely loved it. And if I said, good luck Winston in there. Okay,
final question, complete the sentence. Entrepreneurship is like chocolate because...
There are many, many different types. Some are delicious and some aren't.
Wonderful, thank you very much. We'll now hand over to the audience for some questions. So I think we've got a question here.
Okay. Kenza, who do you want to go first?
We've got Laurie here.
Thanks for your sharing today.
My
And
pleasure.
yeah, I really love your stories, so many stories, but I love the story you offer the chocolate box immediately for the hotel. You know, I really love the story, so I was curious, the brand name of
Laurie, on time.
That's okay.
I could.
You finish your question off.
okay, no problem. So the brand name of Hotel Chocolat, maybe just the name maybe came from that story, the hotel thing.
It didn't come from that.
Yeah.
The thing about, we absolutely loved the word chocolat, which is French for the word for chocolate, because the word chocolate is very industrial sounding and a bit Cadbury's in the UK. And so, but you can't trademark a description, and chocolat is just a word for chocolate. So we had to have another word that went with it. And we looked at lots of different other possibilities, but we hit on Hotel Chocolat because it gave us a sort of feeling of a metaphorical escape and the idea of luxury and spoiling yourself. And so it just sort of worked. And, you know, the more we thought about it, the more exciting it became. So when we did our shop in Watford, we actually decked it out like a hotel. So it had a sort of high desk, you know, and I think it's still there actually. And we had sort of a couple of chairs and things because we thought it was quite a clever thing to do. But it's stood the test of time though. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. Same question.
I was curious about what were your channels of distribution and how did you access your, you mentioned you had like 100,000 sign-ups for the club. Was it through a mailing list? Did you have like alternate ways of reaching your customers directly? Because I feel as an entrepreneur, that's the biggest challenge of customer retention. And maybe it grew organically. And I'm also curious about how you transitioned from like traditional media to more digital media.
I mean, interestingly, we started with catalogues and mailing people, but that also meant that we were very quick to go online. So we were one of the first businesses that embraced the internet. And you have to, if you've got a database that you can constantly contact, it's very powerful because people need reminding. And if any of you that receive catalogues or emails or whatever about products, it's often the prompt that makes you buy. If it's a shirt company or a clothing company, you think, oh yeah, I need a new pair of jeans or I need a new shirt. And that prompt. So if you've got the database, that is the very important part. But when we opened a shop, it actually gave us far more customer contacts. Thousands of people walking past the shop, some of them going into the shop. But it's that reinforcement. And I think most people in marketing who are new to marketing think you only have to tell people once or twice about your idea and they'll get it and they'll buy. It's not true. You have to do it loads of times. And even then, it's not always necessarily the same time. Because people used to say to me, what's your most successful method of getting new customers? And I couldn't answer that. You know, you'd say, well, we've mailed other people's lists. We've had publicity. We've attended exhibitions. We've done advertising. And literally, some of these things, you'd get a few here, a few there. But it was just the mechanism of doing everything you can, but cheaply or free. So, you know, publicity, when we got articles in the national press, it was free. You just had to persuade them to put the article in. Advertising, when we started ChocExpress, we said to them, look, the newspaper, we don't have any money, but we'd like to advertise this in your newspaper. And so they came up with the idea of we pay them a percentage of our sales. So it was 10% of our sales. So if we sold £1,000, it'd be £100. But if we'd have bought the advertising space, it would have probably been £2,000. But we never sold £20,000. So it was a great way of doing it. And it's very good to be upfront with people to say, I haven't got any money, but I'd like to see if we can work together. You know, it's nothing like being direct. Does that answer your question a bit?
No questions. I think the gentleman here had a question.
I wonder if, sorry, I'm a bit hoarse. I wonder if you could share some thoughts about competing brand Tony's Chocolat and their efforts to try and incorporate a bit of social responsibility in their profitability, and whether you kept an eye on them from the start and their meteoric rise to selling bars to actually turning that into a profitable business now.
It's interesting because ethically, Hotel Chocolat is head and shoulders above most other people that embrace things like fair trade. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's certainly not an amazing thing. It gives you a feeling if you go to Waitrose and buy something and it's fair trade, you feel virtuous. Hotel Chocolat, since year 2000, has been funding a cocoa farming community in Ghana, which is the main source of cocoa that Hotel Chocolat buys. We've paid, well, a long time ago, we paid for over 1 million cocoa trees being planted, water boreholes to stop the community having to walk 5 miles to get their water, a medical centre, and that whole thing has expanded. So it's not just one community, it's several communities in Ghana. And so we did lots of things. We may not have fronted with it like Tony's, but having said that, I know they were picked up on over-egging it, and the newspapers didn't like it because, you know, so we underplay it. And, you know, in a way that's a bad thing. We should, whoever's running Hotel Chocolat now should try and put more into that. And also the cocoa estate in St. Lucia is fully sustainable. There's only 2 UK employees out there. There's like 200 plus local employees. It's in a part of the St. Lucian economy where there was 40%, and probably still is 40% unemployment in the agricultural sector. And we were bringing jobs and making a link between tourism and agriculture. So Hotel Chocolat is really, you know, we tend to do our bit with actions rather than talking about it. The last bit I was going to say on this is we typically don't sell most of our products through wholesalers or through other people. I mean, you can get them, Hotel Chocolat things, through a few places, but you won't see them in Tesco or Sainsbury's or places like that typically. And the reason for that is I loved the direct link between the company, Hotel Chocolat, and its customers. And as soon as you introduce someone in the middle, you lose that direct contact. So if you can keep that contact with your customers, you're in a very powerful position. So now Hotel Chocolat has something like 2.5 million people on its database, who've joined, many of whom belong to the VIP Me club, which is a way we can understand how people behave, provide them with offers, but means that we've got that communication channel. If you go through other places, you've lost that link. So I wouldn't like to be in their shoes, if that's what you're suggesting. No, but thank you. It's a very good question. Hello.
You mentioned that a successful businessman needs to know how to fix problems and also stay optimistic. And I wanted to ask about other soft skills that one can develop to succeed in business.
If I could just, would you like to repeat the question?
I think you said what other skills, soft skills can you use to develop your business? I think communication is probably it is incredibly important. And that's communication not just with your customers, but with your suppliers, with your workforce, with your whole team, with your investors maybe. Because without that, and with your bank, so if you can develop those skills, it sort of reassures people. So it reassures your workforce, it reassures your investors, it reassures your customers. And you don't typically see those words written anywhere, and people are often amazed at the culture of Hotel Chocolat. And you can see it if you go into a store, and the reason I asked is that if you go in, hopefully you'll experience the culture where people want to engage with you, they'll happily answer your questions, they'll be really decent people. But that's not been trained, that's been sort of led from the front. So we behave like that in the business, in every part of the business. So whether you're in the factory or in the distribution centre or the stores, everyone behaves in that cooperative, communicative way. And it's incredibly difficult for competitors, I think, to reproduce that. And I know that because, we did from time to time take on people from other businesses that were competitors, and they told a very, very different story. Is that helpful? I've only given you one thing there, but...
Should we do your question?
I just wanted to ask a question about how you maintain a collaborative and friendly relationship with your co-founder, because a lot of businesses fail actually due to co-founder conflict, and I was wondering how you succeeded in managing this relationship.
It's a great question, because I don't know many other people that survived 36 years with the same business partner. I think it's to do with the fact that we were not friends. We were business, we were in Torch Computers, when I recruited Angus, he and I worked together, and we jokingly described that as a business honeymoon, and that's only in the business sense. And it's just meant that the terms of reference were sort of laid down really by our business relationship, not that we went down the pub together and, had a friendship that then overlaid it with a business relationship. So I would say that is the biggest thing. I think part of that is born out of the fact when we started the business, we both sold. So we were both quite confident people. I was then responsible for the financial side of the business. He was responsible for the production, but we were both bringing money in. And so it reinforced our respect for each other that we were able to build this business together. And the other thing is there's a motivation thing. I sort of say 1 + 1 = 3 if you've got a good business partner. I'm not suggesting that you should try and have a business partner for that reason, but if you just happen to be able to have a business partner that is good, then it is motivating. And if I have a problem, I'd say to Angus, what are we going to do about this? And he'll come up with a few ideas and we'll brainstorm it, and the problem seems halved quite quickly, and vice versa. And that happened many, many times. So I would say the last thing I would say is when you're with a business partner, you can't fight. You don't want to be at battle with them. So there were many things that we didn't agree on, but we didn't go to war on them. So you only had to really make sure you succeeded if the things were really business critical. You know, like if the company's going to go bust, you don't say, don't go and do that. You can't sort of hide in a corner. You've got to say, hey guys, we can't do this. So I don't know, it's, you know, and I think being sensible with this sort of focus and, you know, the aligned focus really. So we both liked, you know, having a successful business that was profitable. And we didn't actually borrow money apart from bank overdraft. So the first time we actually sold shares was in 2016 when we floated the business. And we sold a third of the shares. So I retained a third, Angus retained a third, and a third went on the stock exchange. And even when we sold to Mars in 2024, I still had 27% of the business. Angus had 27% of the business. So we still controlled it. And in a way, you know, it's important that you can both get on because, you know, with that level of shares, you have quite a lot of control. So, but, you know, we did it, so.
Wonderful. Last question. Go on.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just wanted to ask in terms of like when you created physical goods, there should have been probably like some bottleneck that you experienced maybe in the early stages of your business building. And was it hard to identify it at first, or after like you were able to identify this bottleneck that was creating stagnation or problems that slows down the production itself? Was it hard to later on optimize it without losing a lot of resources, like both financial and timely resources?
Yeah, I
Would
mean,
you like to repeat the question so everybody else can hear?
so this is about bottlenecks. You know, when you run a business, bottlenecks happen. In other words, you can do one thing, but another part of the business can't keep up, I think is what you were trying to say, or you were saying. And I think in production particularly, where you don't want to spend a load of money before you've got the demand. I'm a great believer that get the demand, get the sales in place, and then everything else can fall into place more easily. Whereas if you do it the other way around, where you build up all the costs and all the machines, but they're all idle because you haven't got the sales, is a far more frightening experience. So I love, you know, get the sales in, and then you will find a way to resolve the problems. And, you know, we had problems, as you can hear, from before we started manufacturing, that, you know, we had to then sort of change the selections of our chocolates to companies that could supply us rather than ones that couldn't. And, you know, those things are quite stressful because you just want to say, that's what we want to offer everyone. That's our standard, you know, box for that size or smaller size. So no, I don't know, necessity is the mother of invention. So you will find a way when you've got the pressure. And certainly if it's important, these are important things, you know, you use your resource and your knowledge and talk to people and find out. And there's always a way.
Thank you. Now, Peter, would you like to award the 3 best questions with your signed book here?
Oh, I can't remember the questions.
Well, we had first one was Laurie here, Achuth, the gentleman behind yourself, you in the red cardigan, and then the lady here.
Okay, so I think the lady about the soft skills.
Okay.
That's one.
Mm-hmm.
One. I think. How many? There's just 2, isn't it?
There's 3.
Okay, I signed one though. That was the one you. There's 4 of them. Sorry.
They can come and get them signed
Oh, I
from
see.
me
Okay.
afterwards, yeah.
The lady here, and just remind me who.
Do you want to put your hands up, the individuals that ask questions,
Who asked
please?
questions? Oh, there's 3 here. Okay, so the gentleman.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So, Peter, thank you so much for your time. I think we've all learned that, you know, with a little bit of cocoa, some sweetness here and some courage, that we can all find some sort of success. And I think that what we've learned here is that having the courage to take the bold steps, even when the time maybe doesn't seem right, is, you know, the self-belief that one should have. So thank you very much for your time. I'd like to thank the organisers for putting on this event.
I just want to say, it's funny, a lot of people ask the question, am I going to start a new business? Because I retired about 18 months ago, And the answer is no, I'm not going to start a new business, but I've actually devoted my life to giving back. And this is an example. It's not the most, dare I say it, needy example, but I'm an enterprise fellow for the King's Trust, which is the old Prince's Trust. So I do talks not dissimilar to this to young people who are literally on the bottom rung. I also support a lot of charities, and so I'm doing my bit, apart from the fact that I'm a family guy and I've got 3 grown-up children, 7 grandchildren, who are all age 6 and under. So I've got a different balance in my life, but you know, I'm very keen to be giving back, and so that's why I'm very happy to come this evening and to share some of my experiences with all of you.
I think what you're saying here is come find me for mentorship.
I'm not saying that, but we'll talk a bit later, won't we?
Absolutely. I think we will, absolutely. So yeah, just to close off the event, thank you to the event organisers for organising the event and inviting me to moderate. For all of you for asking such great questions, and please help me in thanking Peter for joining us today. Thank you, Peter.